Okay, so thank you for joining our adolescent literacy session. We have Julie Hollick here to join us. She is one of the state adolescent literacy leads, and I am Alicia Gray from SST 8, and we just kind of wanted to take you through a couple basics with science of reading, just to kind of set the baseline and then go into a couple different resources. So first, we just have our simple view of reading. This is the word recognition times language comprehension equals reading comprehension. So the basic piece here is that if any of those things are zero, then you won't have true reading comprehension. So we need to teach students to be able to decode and give them the language comprehension side so that they can truly comprehend what they're reading. And then our next piece is implementing Ohio's plan to raise literacy. And this is a guide that we've linked here for Ohio school leaders. I'm going to open it up here. There's a lot of great resources here, and it talks about all different aspects of setting up a literacy program within your school for secondary leaders. So it talks about the shared leadership, organizing your teams, having families as partners, the role of a principal on page 12, what should be included in effective literacy instruction. And it kind of goes into the simple view of reading a little bit more, and then all of the pieces that are essential for adolescent literacy. Some different problem solving, tiered systems of instructional support, so like your MTSS framework. And then it has some different appendices here at the end. It gives you a great sample of a decision rules framework, if that's something you're working on, or building a schedule to support literacy. All of these resources are involved in this document. And one Alicia, of the pieces that we, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I really like this because no matter where your team is, so if you're looking at a teacher-based team, a building level team, no matter where your team is with regards to literacy at the adolescent stage, you can use this document to help guide your work and move forward. And it's available on the department's website as well.
Awesome, thank you. And then one of the pieces that's included is this rating scale. And this would be something that you could do with your building team to just kind of get a current level. So the first thing that they want you to assess is your level of implementation. So are you in the red? You're just exploring it. Orange, you're working on getting it installed in your school. Yellow, you've started it, but you're just in that initial implementation phase. And green is like we're full force ahead, like we're doing it. And each of these pieces, so vocab, fluency, comprehension, focusing on student motivation and how you're doing writing instruction. And then once you've done that rating, coming over here to determine how important it is to your team. So if you're doing something really well and it's not very important, I don't really know. I don't know what that would mean for you, but if you're not doing it, but it is very important, I would think that would be like your priority. Like we need to work on this next. So we know we're not doing it, but we know we need to. So that's where we could focus our efforts. Anything you want to add to that, Julie?
No, I think that's, to your point, they're all very important, but maybe prioritizing or picking out one to focus on to begin with, to begin this work. It's one of those, we need to go slow to go fast. So picking one,
yes,
implementing that, and then moving forward.
Yes. As educators, I feel like we all want to fix everything right away.
Yep.
And I had a school leader who coached me on go slow to go fast, go slow to go fast. I'm still working on that, but hopefully it'll sink in eventually.
It's hard.
Yes. And then we just wanted to share this quote here, embrace a model of prevention, not a model of failure. So especially in the secondary world, you probably already know the students that are coming to you that have struggled in reading their entire life. And we don't have time to wait for them to fail in middle school or high school. Like we need to start intervening right now to prevent further difficulties.
And one of the ways to do that, I love the end of this quote, within a language-rich learning environment that promotes vocabulary and background knowledge. And this is the perfect segue into explicit vocabulary instruction that we're going to go into next. When Alicia shared the simple view of reading on that language comprehension side, vocabulary and background knowledge fall under that language comprehension. And so explicit vocabulary instruction is something that can be done in any content area. Any teacher can do it. Music, art, can even be in PE if they're reading about what they're going to be learning about, science, social studies, math. So this vocabulary instruction is recommended in the IES practice guide, the one from the Improving Adolescent Literacy, Effective Classroom and Intervention Practice. And so in this guide, they give 5 recommendations. And if you look over to the right, you see how they all have strong evidence and they're all a very great strategy to implement. We're going to focus on number 1, providing explicit vocabulary instruction, because this is a great one, an easy one for all disciplines to adopt at a middle school, high school level. If you go to the guide, as Alicia has pulled up, it'll walk you through the recommendation, give you a summary of the recommendation, show you how to go about carrying that recommendation out or implementing it. And probably my favorite part is at the end, they also talk about those potential roadblocks, things that you could encounter as you're implementing. So it's kind of like thinking about those roadblocks and then how we can keep those from even happening. All right. So our next slide.
Sorry.
Nope,
Did I
you're
skip
fine.
one?
Nope,
Okay.
you're okay. Nope, we're good. So our next one just describes exactly what is this explicit vocabulary instructional routine. So anytime we're explicit in our instruction, going back to Anita Archer, it's clear, direct, and concise instruction. So this falls right under that body of knowledge we call the science of reading. This is what we know students need in order to learn. So we provide students with explicit vocabulary instruction before they read a complex text. And defining a complex text, a grade level text. So if I am a high school chemistry teacher and my students are getting ready to read a section in their textbook, that would be a complex text because it is a grade level text. I'm going to teach 1 or 2 or 3 vocabulary words that are going to be in that text. While I'm doing that, I'm also going to not only teach students those words that they're going to need to understand that text, but I'm also going to be providing some background knowledge to help them better understand it. I think a lot of us, and I was very guilty of this when I was teaching middle school, we had a vocabulary workbook and we had 15 words. And I was a language arts teacher. Every Monday, I would introduce those words. The kids would look up the definitions. They'd use them in sentences. We'd play quizzes on Thursday to review. And then on Friday, they would take their test. There was no connection between what they were reading and what they were learning. And so this idea of explicit vocabulary instruction, having the vocabulary words correlate directly with the text they're reading is super important. So it's not copying a list of words, looking up the words in the glossary, or writing down their definitions. Go ahead, Alicia. Thanks. So if you're familiar with Hattie's work with effect size, Hattie says that anything over a 0.4 has a strong effect size and it's worth our time. The explicit vocabulary routine has an effect size of 0.97. So if we look on the next slide, you can kind of see that continuum. So that 0.97 falls into that zone of desired effects. So it's definitely, and that goes back to the IES practice guide with their strong level of evidence. That's where they get that from. So this is definitely something that is worth our time, worth time to teach teachers this strategy so they can then work with students. So on the next slide, we're going to walk through this quick 4-step process. If you'd like more information, my favorite resource is Anita Archer's book, Explicit Instruction. There is a section in there on explicit vocabulary instruction, and it follows these 4 steps: introducing the word's pronunciation, introducing its meaning in a student-friendly way, illustrating the word with examples and non-examples, and then checking students' understanding. So on the next slide, I have an example. So I'll kind of walk through this like I would if I was teaching students. So if I'm a math teacher and our word for today is analyze, that's something that I feel like students need to understand before we read this section in our math book about looking at some data. If we're in a unit on statistics and they're going to look at some data, analyze is my word. So I would put that up on the board. I used to do a slideshow. You would display the word, you'd point to it and say it, and then have students repeat it back to you. Research shows that students need to have engagement with the word anywhere from like 10 to 14 times. And it can be even more than that for our students who struggle. And so as many times as we can get that word out there, have students say it and interact with it, the better. So I might say to students, today our word is analyze. Say the word with me, and students would say analyze. Then I would have on the board the word's meaning. And sometimes you can get that from the complex text or the glossary, but it's important to put it into student-friendly terms so that they can understand the true meaning of the word. So our word is analyze. It's a verb. Remember, a verb is an action. It's something that we do. What is our word? Students would say analyze. Thanks, Alicia. And what's part of speech? It's a verb. So analyze means it has 2 definitions. So we've talked about words in the past that have multiple meanings. These meanings are fairly similar. So if I'm analyzing something, I can separate it into parts, or I can look at something critically. When we use our word analyze in class today, we're going to be using that second definition to look at things critically. We're going to be looking at our data critically. So then on the next slide, I would show them examples and non-examples. Again, this is all evidence-based, so showing kids these, and I always like to include pictures as well, just to give students something to attach that learning to. So my example would be the students will analyze the data before turning in the report. Okay, read that sentence with me. The students will
analyze
the data
before turning in the report.
Hard on Zoom. So there I see a picture.
I'll be a quiet student.
Of students analyzing that data. So what are the students doing to the data? They would say they were analyzing it. What does that mean? They're looking at the data critically, right? Now here's a non-example. My mom glanced at the paper before signing it. So if that's a non-example, what do you think glanced means? So they might say, like, she just looked at it quickly. That's right. Read that sentence with me. Super. Now, how is glanced different than analyzed? So we could have that conversation. This whole vocabulary routine is not intended to take any more than 5 or 6 minutes. So we're going through it quickly. We're doing that pre-teaching. And you can also see how we're putting in that background knowledge about what the students are going to be reading. We're talking about how that word applies to the data that we're going to do, to be looking at. And then the last step is to check students' understanding. So asking them questions, giving them a sentence starter. So I might say to students, okay, read this sentence with me. Now remember, you want them to be saying and using the word. So we might read together, what is something you could analyze in math class? They were paying attention, they would know we're going to analyze that data. And then I might change it. What might you analyze in science class? So you're checking their understanding to make sure that they know what that word means. So if we look at the word analyze, that's kind of like our root or our base word. Look at that next question. What do you think it means to be analytical? So asking students to think about that word in a slightly different format. And then the last one, use the word analyze in the sentence. Start your sentence with, I can analyze. And again, if you're pressed for time, this could be one where they turn and talk to a partner. I've given them a sentence starter. So chances are that they're going to use that word correctly because I've started the sentence. You could also have them, if they have a math notebook or a science journal, they could write that in there. I can analyze, and have them finish that sentence. So and then the teacher is circulating, listening as the students are sharing, glancing over shoulders as students are writing. And then I always had one or two students that would share out. And I didn't usually ask for volunteers. I would usually just walk around, and somebody that had a sentence written down that was correct, or maybe somebody that I heard share with a partner that used the word correctly in a sentence, I would ask them to share. Now, how do you know which words to choose for this vocabulary routine? Words worth teaching, again, evidence and research shows us that these tier 2 words, these are vocabulary words that are high utility across the subject areas. Analyze is one of those words that can be used in multiple different areas. Those are the words we really want to focus on. I was meeting with teachers a few weeks ago, and I had a teacher ask me, well, what about my content specific words? Those would be tier 3 words. Those are important to teach as well. I probably wouldn't spend quite as much time on them as I would the tier 2 words. Those you might do a quicker version of this routine for those words. Or you might give those words to students. You would practice saying them. You might give them a student-friendly definition. And then as you were reading the text and those words were being used, you might talk about them more in that context. On the next slide, these are some good questions that I like to ask yourself when you try to figure out if it's a good word to teach, if it's worth your time. Some of the big ones, is it necessary for the comprehension of the grade level text? So that text that you're getting ready to read with students, do they need to know what that word means in order to understand that text? Because remember, comprehension's our goal. That's our goal for reading, is to be able to understand. We're learning vocabulary words and building that background knowledge so that we can comprehend that text. All right, and then keep in mind, this is kind of my big takeaway, all students, no matter their level, no matter what they struggle with, vocabulary and word study, if they're explicitly taught every day in every class in the context of the lesson, because the next thing I would do after I taught that word analyze is we would then go in and read that paragraph in our book where that word is. They would see the connection. We'd have a short discussion. And then if we were in math, we'd move on and solve our math problems. If we were in chemistry, we would go do our lab. But students knowing this routine, getting this routine across disciplines is going to help them to quickly grasp these vocabulary words and going to help them to be able to then understand the complex text, which is our ultimate goal. So as you think about these things, think about how your teachers currently teach vocabulary and maybe a strategy that you could take back to your teachers.
Awesome. Thank you, Julie. And
Sure.
these are just some additional resources. This one Julie actually showed me, which I think is awesome. It's basically summarizing the practices from the IES practice guide on a nice one pager, so that you're not having to read as much and still getting to the important pieces. So that is linked here, the Nebraska practice guide summaries.
I call it the Spark Notes. The Spark Notes of the IES.
Yes, yes, for sure. And then down here we have some checklists that you could use to, if you're doing a walkthrough in one of your classrooms, there's a whole section on vocabulary. Let me pull that up real quick. if you go, they broke them down by grade level band. So if you're 4, 5, 6, 8, or 9, 12, let me just jump down to 38 so I can show you a high school example. So we have each section. So they have writing, and then there's things to look for under each of these. Comprehension. So there's a whole, try to get to the vocab. Here we go. Vocab and advanced word study. So these are the kind of things to look for that go along with the practice guides. And then you can put in evidence for instructional delivery, student learning, or materials. And that could help inform your PD that you're providing for your teachers, or if you wanted to use it to kind of help guide like where they're going with their OTEs, however you would like to use this, it'd be easily turned into a Google form to keep track of all that data.
And I like it too, Alicia, the idea of peer coaching or working within your TBTs. And, once you kind of get things off the ground, maybe having somebody come in and watch and just do that quick checklist just for some feedback, because I think sometimes we get teaching and we get busy and we don't realize, oh, maybe we forgot that step, or you didn't notice the couple of kids in the back that didn't quite get it. So I really like that.
Sure.
I think it's a great tool.
And I think just from my instructional coaching background, I feel like even if you're not comfortable with another person coming in and kind of checking that for you, for your teachers, you could encourage the teachers to use their computer or their iPad or something to record themselves too. And no one else has to see that video, but it's a good reflection tool for them to like sit back and like, okay, this is what I think is happening in my classroom, but let me get a clear picture of what actually is going on. I had a story where I had to record a lesson for my praxis or whatever it was called at the time, and my cooperating teacher was like, I don't think you want to use that one. And then we watched it and I'm like, okay, didn't even know that was going on. It gives you that chance to see other things that you might not see because you're so busy teaching. So
yeah, I love that idea. That's a great idea.
And then these are just a couple of the other IES practice guides. So this is the one that we referenced today. It has 5 recommendations, and the vocab is the first one. And then this is for like your tier 2, tier 3. So giving reading interventions for students in grades 4 through 9. I honestly think it would go up to 12, but yeah. And then some more, this is a good little decision rules for middle school, high school, if they're struggling, what to do and what assessment to give them. And then if you're interested in that 4-9 practice guide, there's a slideshow linked right here that you could go through with your teachers to give them step-by-step the pieces of that practice guide and some examples of lessons that they could do. Let me click on that real quick. So it just kind of goes through each, so building the decoding, talking about how to look at the syllables and prefixes and suffixes. It gives lots of examples of different assessments you could use to diagnostics to figure out what specific area they're struggling in, and lots of different resources linked in here. And then a different routine for that. And then these are just different diagnostics that are linked on this slide here. If your district hasn't used a reading tiered fidelity inventory yet to kind of get a baseline of where you're at, we either can come out and help you with that, or you can click on this link here and you can become a facilitator yourself if you would like to implement it with your district. It just kind of gives you a good starting point, especially if you're helping to write like a local literacy plan or your one plan. Gives you informed information about where you're at and what you already have in place from a systems level. And then I forget, Julie, did you put this one in here, the knowledge gap?
I think Kim did, but it's also
Okay.
it's just a good read on the state of things right now in education and the things that we're looking to do to try to fix where
close the gap.
we're at. But this whole idea of explicit instruction, like we talked about, is very, very prominent.
Awesome. Thank you. And then here we just have a survey, just looking for some feedback on what our adolescent literacy boots on the ground people out there are looking for, so that we can tailor these sessions to what you need. So if you're watching this and you want to scan it and give us some feedback, that would be greatly appreciated. And then here's a couple upcoming events for SST8 or the Summit ESC. So check our websites if you'd like to register for either of those. And I think that's it. Julie, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, thank you for having me. I enjoyed sharing today. Please reach
Awesome.
out if you have any questions, and Alicia, I
Yes,
would be happy to help.
definitely. Okay. Well, thank you guys and have a great rest of your day.